Welcome to the Think Governance podcast channel, where we unpack governance questions at a deeper level to directors that help boards become more effective and agile, ultimately leading to better business.
So welcome back to this episode. Today I'll be talking to Hester Hickey. Hester is presently working as a corporate governance consultant, and over her long career she's held a number of non-executive director positions, including the likes of Syca, Cashbuild, Omnia, Barloworld, Pepco, and Northern Platinum, to name a few. She's a chartered accountant by profession and has been involved in a number of IoDSA initiatives, including facilitating training and board evaluations for us, and also being a contributor to a number of our technical forums. Hester, thank you so much for joining me to share your insights.
Thank you, Parmi. It's a pleasure. I have always supported the IoD and I suppose right to the end.
Absolutely. So over your long and illustrious career, what are some of the things that make you most proud?
I was trying to think of one event, but my whole life has been, I think, small little wins. And I was a secretary for 7 years before I started studying. So when I finally got my honours degree at 30 and passed the board exam at 31, that I think was the first big achievement and the change in my career.
Wow, that's just amazing. And it just goes to show you it's never too late. People think they have to get it right as soon as they leave school.
And I managed to do everything the wrong way. You know, I went to IoDSA. I wasn't at the big universities. The first time I, in fact, attended a lecture at a university was when I was lecturing at WITS. So it was quite a daunting experience. And that was another achievement that I enjoyed, teaching the people there. So I've done lots of different things. And I was always criticized for perhaps not staying long enough in any specific profession. But in the end, I just followed the opportunities that came my way.
So, you know, the grit and tenacity that it takes to follow the journey that it seems you followed resonates with me, because we often have younger members of the IoD wanting to be in these big listed company boards, but wanting a quick step to that, and that isn't always possible.
No, it isn't always possible. And I think my first appointment was to Joburg City Audit Committee, and that I was 48 at the time. And I was there for 7 years before I retired early at 55, and then managed to take full-time job as a director of boards and a consultant specifically for the IoD.
So since you mentioned Joburg City Audit Committee, one of the things we see in the public sector is that oftentimes you're appointed as an audit committee member, but you're not a member of the board.
Yes.
Did you find that challenging? Because I often wonder how people do it.
I found it very challenging. The chairman was someone I knew well, Mr. Hawksworth from Ernst & Young, and he was a very good audit committee chair. But he was the only one that actually interacted with the city manager and the council itself. And none of us ever got near there. Despite that, we managed to get the city to have clean audits for a number of years before I left. And it was a huge challenge. It took a lot of effort and time, but it was worthwhile.
I think that should have been on your list of proud moments as well. I mean, to get a municipality, into having a clean audit is certainly an accomplishment. So what are some of the biggest lessons you feel you've learned over your career?
I was reading a quote the other day by T.S. Eliot where he said, "Only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go." And I think despite being in risk and being risk-averse and conservative when it comes to accounting and governance and risk for that matter, as far as my personal life is concerned, I've always taken those risks. I've taken on the Joburg City position. I took on a position at a company where the board and management had all been removed because of fraud. And I was on that committee, I chaired the audit committee for at least 7 years of this distressed company. And it was incredibly difficult, but I think I learnt as much as I would have on a university MBA, because it could be the perfect case study of what can go wrong. And we had to deal with all the challenges involved in that whole company and the process.
So I know many people who would shy away from those tough jobs, and go for the more glamorous or perception of easy positions. So well done on that. I don't think there's many people who would do that, but I also think it aligns to what we say about serving, right? About directorship is not just about what you're going to get out of it, but it's about serving an entity and wanting to do good and wanting that entity to improve.
Exactly. And I must admit, sometimes you join a company and you think, oh, this one will be a breeze, and the challenges that come at you are never easy. I know people really want to be on boards, but I want to caution people that there are times that it is incredibly stressful. And some of those times are not necessarily in the difficult companies, they can be in the easier companies. But being committed to being a really good director and doing what you need to do takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of energy and a lot of courage. I think courage is probably the biggest thing that you have to be in order to be a director. You're going to fail, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to be in trouble at some stage or another. I think it was Mervyn King that said to me, you aren't a director on companies without scars on your back. And that's the truth, because it isn't always easy, but in the end, it is worthwhile.
So you talk about the stress that some of these positions bring with them. You add on to that the potential legal liability, the potential reputational damage, etc., if things don't go correct. For me, it's even more reason to be very careful about which positions you take on. And secondly, to be absolutely sure you have the competence, you are ready, you've done the training, you've read background material on the entity. All these things are so important. What are some of your views? Because what I'm seeing out there is people perhaps go in unprepared for what they've taken on.
I think they do, and I think some people think it is a glamorous job, and I don't find it glamorous at all, because you have to be on your toes constantly. You have to listen to what's going on around you. You have to have a broad view. So you have to understand the industry, the company, the nuances, the people's cultures, the people's personalities. And to be a really good director, you have to take this broad view and bring everything to account when you're taking decisions, because people will say to you, well, you're on the board, or you're the audit committee chair, tell them what they must do. Nobody in the world will do anything because you tell them these days. You have to influence them, and you have to influence them in a manner that they are comfortable with. So somebody turned around to me and says, oh, so you got to manipulate people. That's not the issue. The issue is don't always take the credit. Give it to them. Didn't you say that we should do X is a lot better than saying you have to do Y. So when I started, I could be a bit of a bull in a china shop, and I would say, oh, well, here's the issue. And everyone would look at me as if I've shot somebody. And I learned over the years that you can tell the truth, you can put the issue on the table, but you can come across as rude. Or you can think about it and think, how best would it be to put this that people will fully understand what you're trying to say? And it really helped me be more compassionate, to realize people look at it from their perspective, and to put myself in their shoes so that I don't come across as abrasive. And that took some doing.
So it's a very far cry from this perceived big fee for just 4 meetings a year. I mean, clearly you've outlined so much more goes into the role.
Yes, it does. Funnily enough, and a lot of people will say directors don't really get paid enough. And elsewhere in the world, they get paid a lot more. It's not something you do for the money. If you're doing it for the money, you're probably doing it for the wrong reason. You'll probably take on too many boards. You'll probably not put enough effort into each of your boards. And in the end, the risk that comes with it, the difficulty when you're dealing with investigations or legal issues and the years it adds to your life take quite a toll. So the stress involved is a tough one.
So that doesn't mean people should shy away from it, but be prepared for it, ready themselves, I think, for these positions.
Correct. In fact, people must do it, because the world out there needs good directors who are committed and are, they're going to do the right thing. And I see so many of my fellow directors that are so committed to doing what's right. And they have the same attitude. You do it because you believe in it.
Absolutely. So what tips do you have for the next generation of directors?
My goodness. Work hard. Then make sure you are courageous, and that no matter what comes at you, you're not going to walk away, because you have a duty to your shareholders, to your companies, to your country, to actually do it to the best of your ability to make sure that governance is followed appropriately. Not just the tick box kind of governance, but that you do the right thing for the right reason.
So you mentioned at the beginning, you said work hard. And I'm wondering, do you have some practical tips for us on what do you yourself do in preparation for a board meeting? So how far in advance do you start preparing, and what does that look like for you?
The difficulty is you don't often have a choice, because although people try very hard to give you the 10 days or the 2 weeks or whatever the mandate is, sometimes they struggle as well and you don't get it that early. But you have to. It doesn't matter if you work till 2 a.m. for a couple of nights. You've got to prepare yourself for that board meeting. But even before that, I read, I keep up to date. My age and being near retirement doesn't mean I don't know what's going on in the world around me. I still constantly, in between board meetings, make sure that I'm involved in the forums. I listen to what's going on, and I read broadly. For instance, the area that I have been focusing on is the whole sustainability and climate change and cyber risk, and you have to know what's going on out there. You can't sit on a board and just say, well, we'll find the expert, because firstly, they're not easy to find, and secondly, you can't have just a cyber expert on your board. They would be bored to tears because there's so much else involved. And they would probably not be interested in doing all the other things that it entails. So it's constant hard work.
Yeah, far too often you see a board and they say, well, we brought on this person because they're an IT expert, and we brought on that person because they're a human resource expert or whatever. But it's almost like every non-executive director needs to be comfortable with all these areas of oversight and not just rely on that one person.
I agree with you. And sometimes when a company has a specific issue, those people are so useful. So it's not that they're not useful. Yeah. And some of those directors then get that broad perspective. So it's the person rather than the specialism that's important.
Absolutely. And also not abdicating responsibility in any way. I mean, we've seen even internationally, there was a case where the audit committee couldn't necessarily be purely relied on by the board when the board was approving the financial statements. The board also had to apply their minds.
Yes.
So more and more, it's a case of collective responsibility and accountability, really.
Correct. And that was the case in Australia, where in fact, the people who were found to be negligent were board members in general, and a number of financial managers at the same time. So it was a broad spectrum of people that were found guilty of being negligent. So it's in fact, as an audit committee chair, there's a big risk that people abdicate to you.
Absolutely.
And I just Every time I hear someone say, oh, well, you don't necessarily have to read all the papers, I go crazy. You do have to read all the papers. No matter what your role on that board is, it's a collective responsibility. And again, that's where the hard work comes in.
So my experience certainly has been on some boards that they defer to the audit committee, and the full board don't even read the full set of financials or integrated report, and they sort of want to leave the numbers to the numbers people, as they say, which is problematic.
I drive it in with my board members that you might pick up something that I miss because you're an engineer or you're a legal expert. So please read those papers carefully and raise the issues that come to mind.
Very useful. You mentioned earlier, you touched on the number of boards that people take on sometimes.
Yes.
And, I certainly picked up during COVID that some people were so overwhelmed with boards that they couldn't fit in extra meetings in a time of crisis, etc. What do you think is the golden number or range of number that you think a professional non-executive director is able to manage in a year?
I ended up being on 6 boards at one time, and 2 of them I'd resigned from one, and they took a long time to replace me. And the other one was the one in distress, which I couldn't leave until the deal had gone through. And 6 was far too many. 4, I could cope with a few years ago. Now, because of the extra effort and possibly the extra roles I play on the boards that I'm on, I would never, ever again take on more than 3. But that's me. And I do also like to do other things. So, I don't just work. Yeah. I think on my gravestone, they'll say, what did she do? She worked. But I did take time for reading and bird watching and holidays and things like that. So 3, I think, is doable. 2 is comfortable. But more than that, you've got to work full time.
So thank you so much, Hester. I've so enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure our members will take a lot away from it. And thank you all for joining us again.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.